I'm glad you've joined me for the Sunday school class this morning. Open your Bibles to Luke chapter 23, and we'll be looking at verses 33 through 46. Now, in this particular chapter, we're going to find the sacrificial life of Jesus Christ for lost mankind. Now, I realize we've already celebrated Easter and the resurrection, and now we're coming again to talk about the death of Christ. But I want you to understand that when Jesus died on the cross, he made provision for the sins of man that will never be made again, and he made provisions for the sins of man as he died on that cross. Now, the resurrection validates that death as reality. I've been saying for quite some time in the Gospel of John, John does two things constantly in his gospel, and Luke does about the same thing in his gospel. One, he wants to show us the humanity of Jesus Christ. He actually suffered on the cross. And the second thing, he wants to show the absolute victory of Jesus Christ in the glory of the resurrection. So we're going to look at this idea of being sacrificed. Now, Jesus has already said, no one can take my life, I have to give it up. There's a book that someone has written called Lives Given, Not Taken. It's a story of missionaries who gave their lives because they felt like God sent them to a dangerous place and they wanted to share the gospel of Christ. And as a result of that, they were killed. Now, when we understand what sacrifice is all about, we have to understand why Jesus was sacrificed. I have gone over and over again in my brain what John and Luke are talking about when they talk about the inability of Pilate to make a decision. Pilate gives five test questions about Jesus and the validity of who he is. Now, I'm going to read these five test questions, and then we're going to build our lesson based on that. These are the five questions. Number one, are you the king of the Jews? That's the first test question Pilate asks before he makes the decision about the sacrifice. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus says, you say I am, and you enter into that dialogue. Question number two, am I a Jew? Do you expect me to understand what's going on in the Jewish religion? Do you expect, am I a Jew? I don't understand you people. I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand what the fight's all about. He comes back and keeps saying, I find no fault in this man. I find no reason. And Jesus has to die by being hung on a cross. The method of death, capital punishment in Israel, was stoning to death. You remember they stoned Stephen. And as a result, we need to know he has to be, if I be lifted up. It comes back to that passage in the Gospel of John when Jesus says to Nicodemus, let's get on the same page, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave, they didn't take it, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. He came not to destroy the world, but to save the world. When we know that we are putting together the Old Testament pattern and the New Testament reality, we have to deal with the death of Jesus Christ as the fulfillment of both of those things. In the Old Testament, we're looking toward the coming of Christ. In the New Testament, we're looking over our shoulder at something that's already happened. And they all come together at Calvary. Am I a Jew? I don't understand how the Jews missed it. They saw what he did. They heard what he taught. And yet they totally ignored that and cried out, "Crucify him." All Jesus ever did and all he ever taught was for the good of mankind. Now, if you want to know what the Old Testament teaching in terms of the Ten Commandments, if you want to know what that is, go to Matthew 5, 6, and 7 and study the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus exposes, he exegetes the Ten Commandments. And here's how you deal with them, and here's how you live with them. I don't know how they missed that. Raising people from the dead. It was the raising of Lazarus from death that the Jewish hierarchy decided we have to kill Jesus, and we have to do it as soon as we possibly can without making a mess of things. We have to kill him. How do you go about condemning someone who has only done good all of their life and ministry? And not only what he says, but what he does. They missed it. He said it, and then he gave an example of it. For instance, when Luke writes the book of Acts, he says, "A former treatise have I written, O Theophilus." He's talking about the book of Luke. "Of all that Jesus began to do," what was that? Heal the sick, make the blind to see, raising people from the dead, making the lame to walk. That's what he did. What did he teach? He taught about why he is doing these things. So when he says, "Am I a Jew?" he puts himself outside the understanding. If I'm supposed to get it, why didn't they get it? If I'm supposed to understand it, why didn't they understand it? Or why don't they understand it? Am I a Jew? Question number 3. Why do your own people absolve themselves from you? Why do they neglect you? Why do they not understand it? Why do they not get it? That's the third question. That's the question I just discussed. How did they miss it? Why were they so blind? And they made the fatal mistake of totally denying the prophecy of the Old Testament in conjunction with what Jesus began to do and to teach in the New Testament. Question number 4. Are you a king? Now here's where he really gets on the hot seat when they come to understand that they're going to have to cry louder and louder, "Crucify him, crucify him, release unto us Barabbas," and all that story. And Jesus finally, Pilate wants to know, are you a supernatural king? And Jesus gives him no answer. They do have that little bit of dialogue about, "I have the power to let you go and I have the power to take your life." Jesus says, you don't have any power. That's not given by God himself. Whatever you do, God's going to take and use for his glory. Question number 5. What is truth? That's the 5th question that Pilate asked. What is truth? Jesus is truth. He says in chapter 14 of John's Gospel, "I am the way, I am the truth." So when we know Jesus, we know truth. When we live for Jesus, we're living for truth. When we speak for Jesus, we're speaking for truth. Now that upsets a lot of folks because they believe in a multiplicity of ways to come to know God and a multiplicity of gods that they can come to know. Listen, I'm here to tell you, if you want to know truth, you're going to find ultimate truth in Jesus Christ, if you want to know truth. So here is Jesus, and they're getting ready to crucify him on the cross. Now the context. He goes through all of these trials with Annas, and then with later on, Annas had been high priest. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was now the high priest, who is the one that put forth the idea, let one die for all. He knew that if Jesus died, that would satisfy most of the Jews. Let one die for all. He's the one that advocated that. Both of them were very prosperous. Both of them were very astute. Both of them were high priest, and the high priest office had been held for years by Annas and his descendants, his sons, and now his son-in-law. So here's Caiaphas. Here's the Sanhedrin that come for a formal hearing in Luke chapter 22. Here the chief priests and the elders bring Jesus before the Roman government. Here we find Jesus having to deal with what is reality in terms of who I am and what I am doing. And dealing with that is not always an easy thing to do. As Jesus deals with it, he comes to the understanding that I must come to the place that I challenge everything about what Pilate is saying. Now, the one thing that he does also, he scourges Jesus. Now, scourging simply meant they took a whip and they used that whip, and in every way they could, they tried to take the flesh off the body of the person. I'm told they were allowed 40 licks, but usually they took 39, because the 40th lick was designed to take the life of the person. Many times it would just leave the vital organs of the body exposed and the ripples of fresh flesh on the person's back and on the ribs. It's unusual, absolutely. How Jesus did not die from the scourging, because we just know that if they had ever scourged anyone, he was going to receive more than anyone had ever received. So here is Jesus, who finally scourged, walks outside, so given, so drained of energy. He uses Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross and to finish the operation of getting the cross to the place that's called the skull, Golgotha, the skull. Now, let's look at the scripture. First of all, I want to read 23, 33, and 34. 23, 33, and 34. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, Golgotha, place of the skull, there they crucified him and the malefactors, one on the right and one on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And they parted his raiments and cast lots. Now, here is this awful treatment that they're going to give to Jesus at Calvary. He is going to be the go-between. He's going to try to let them know what he's about. He's going to try to let them understand that he is the King of the Jews, but he is the King of Kings. And Judaism is a part of that. He's not just the king. This was a mistake they were making. They believed that Jehovah was their God alone. Jesus was saying, no, he is the God of the whole world. There is one God, and that God is Jehovah. And so here they struggle with this concept, this idea. They come to Calvary, and they crucify him. Crucifixion is a horrible way to die, as you can well imagine. In fact, Romans would never crucify another Roman. That was illegal. That was for the outsiders. That was for those who came in and broke the law and committed the capital punishment. And so here is sacrifice. Here is crucifixion. Here is the driving of the nails into the hands and into the feet. Now you can decide whether it's in this part of the hand or this part of the hand. probably it is more through the wrist and that fleshy part of the hand, so that it would not immediately just tear itself by the weight of the body. But nonetheless, Jesus was crucified between two thieves. Now, these thieves get into a conversation. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. If you can save yourself, you can save us. Now, the truth of the matter is they were not interested in him saving himself. They were interested in him saving them. So come down from the cross and save us. And one of the thieves said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand any of this. This man has done nothing to deserve this crucifixion. You and I deserve everything we're getting." And then he makes an abrupt change and is no longer talking to the other thief on the other side of Jesus. He talks to Jesus. "When you come into your kingdom, remember me." Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." So this crucifixion, where the gravity of the body, later on we're going to come see that they break the legs so that they can push death ahead. Well, the breaking of legs, simply the legs was the only thing that would support them as they hung on the cross. And when you break those legs, all of their body weight just falls down on their hands, and they suffocate in a very short period of time because they cannot breathe. And so their lungs fill up with blood and they die. And so here is Jesus is already dead when they come back to check on him a little later. And we'll see that in a moment. And so he asked for forgiveness, and Jesus promised that he would forgive them. Now look at verse 35 through 39. As the people stood beholding. 35, verse 35 through 39. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, "He saved himself, he saved others, let him save himself. He is the Christ, the chosen of God." And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, "If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself." And a superscription also was written over him in letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. "This is the King of the Jews." This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which railed on him, saying, "If thou be the Christ, save thyself and us." So here is the picture of Jesus being crucified on the cross. And above the cross is the placard, "This is the King of the Jews." Now, there were three reactions to that placard. Number one, the reaction of the people, it didn't matter what it said. Didn't matter. To the Jews, it mattered. They even tried to get Pilate to change it. He said, "I am the King of the Jews." And the only time Pilate shows any spine whatsoever is when he says, "I'm not going to change it. What I have written, I have written. He is the King of the Jews." Now, in that, written in Greek and Hebrew and Latin, there was this understanding of what was taking place. Because some read all three languages, everyone read at least one of the languages. And so the Jews missed it entirely when they wanted to change it. They were upset by it. The people didn't bother them, bothered the Jews. Jesus claimed it victoriously just a little later on, that he is the King of the Jews. Now here's what the Greeks gave us. The Greeks gave us thought. Let me back up. Let me rewind. The Greeks gave us structured thought and beauty. Structured thought and beauty. Rome gave us organization of government, how to rule, how to build an army, how to keep things in place. Now, whether you like the Roman government or not, it was a government by law, a government by rule. And you didn't break the rules without suffering. And then it was Hebrew for the Jews, who gave us one God, one world, both. God created the world and God sent his Son to save it. That's what the Jews have given to the world. One God, monotheism, one God, not a multiplicity of gods as some would believe. So they mock him. They make fun of him, saying to him, "This is the King of the Jews. Let him save himself. He saved others. Let him save himself." Now, as the soldiers focused on him in verses 36 through 38, they mocked him. Now, Luke does not record the statement, I'm thirsty, or I thirst. Now, I'm not so sure about the statement, I thirst, that it had to be an actual physical human thing that Jesus was saying, but I think it was more than that. I think when he cried out, I thirst, if I remember correctly, it's fulfillment of the prophecy of Zechariah, that the one who was dying on the cross will cry out, I thirst. Now, when he does this, they try to give him vinegar. They try to do something that the pain would go away some, and Jesus would not receive it. He needed to know that all of the pain he was suffering was for a good cause, to save lost man. So they mocked him. They gambled for his clothing. They shouted him down. They were so rude. Their language must have been so offensive. I can only imagine all that they were saying to Christ. He didn't have anything to prove to the crowds. His proof would come in the resurrection. Now in verses 40 through 43, but the other answering said, mocking, dost thou not fear God? Now, I've already gone through that. That was the two thieves in conversation. And the one says to him, remember me. And Jesus does an unusual thing. Today, you will be with me in paradise. Now, for me, paradise is the same thing as heaven, or it is a part of heaven. Not to get into all of that discussion, I am not sure that we will realize all that heaven is until the end of time and the ushering in of the millennial age. I'm not sure we understand all that heaven is. There is that waiting period. So, today you will be with me in paradise. Paradise being heaven or part of heaven. Now, he knew he was dying because he broke the law. Now, how does this story end? How does it come to pass? I want you to look at verses 44 through 46. Verses 44 through 46. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the earth until the 9th hour, 3 hours of darkness. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. No one took his life. I commend my spirit. Into thy hands I commend my spirit. Having said this, he gave up the ghost. And when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. And all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote upon their breast and returned, and all of his acquaintances and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. It begins and ends with the victory that comes through Jesus Christ, the darkness that comes. Now remember, darkness is always connected with evil, as light is connected with goodness. When God said, "Let there be light," light overcame the darkness. Light will overcome the darkness every single time. Every time. Dark room, light a match. It overcomes the darkness. So here's the darkness. 3 hours of it, pitch dark. And then suddenly, the veil is rent. The other Gospels tell us from top to bottom, as if God took his hands and just tore it apart. Not from the bottom to the top. Here is Jesus finally dying on the cross. Horrific death for you and for me. Now, in this season of the year, when we still have the resurrection in our mind and heart, and our choir sings so well, there ain't no way to keep me in the grave. There's no way. I'm going to get up out of the ground. I'm not going to stay in the grave. I'm going to be resurrected with Jesus Christ. I hope you know that. I hope you understand that you are part of the sacrifice and the victory. God bless you.